So we'll start with introduction to JavaScript. So this is where we started. We introduced several subjects about JavaScript, what JavaScript is, what it stands for, why is it important. So JavaScript is used in the browser and also is used in the servers and in the backend. And also JavaScript and Java are two total different things. So they're two different programming languages. Those are kind of important things to know about JavaScript. It's the only language that works in the browser. So when you go here inspect and you go to console, you can run JavaScript here and run it that way. You cannot run other languages in here. So that's very important because the browser is everybody's using browser, so it's important language. So we said hello world. You just say console log hello world, and that's how you can write your first hello world in JavaScript. We talked about how to link JavaScript to HTML. Since we learned HTML, this is a internal way of connecting JavaScript to HTML. You could put a script here and then alert. So in the head, you could put the JavaScript in the head of the HTML or in the body of the HTML in the footer. So you put these tags, script, the closing tag of script, and then after that you could write any JavaScript in here, alert or whatever JavaScript you want to run. There's also external way, which is connecting JavaScript, putting your JavaScript in a different file. So here we put JavaScript in a different file, and that way we're using the same tags, but JavaScript is not. We're not writing JavaScript within the HTML file. We're writing it in a different file. So those are two ways to connect. We also talked about comments, how to write comments in JavaScript. If you wanna write one line comment of JavaScript, you write it this way. If you wanna write it multiple lines, this is how you write it. Okay, so those are the basics, and then we talked about variable. So JavaScript has three ways to declare variable. The first way is var. So you declare it this way. You say var, and then you give the variable a name. And variable is basically a container of information. So you could store one thing, just like a string, or you could store a number, something like that. So here we said var name is equal to James Bond, and this is a string. That's why we put quotation around it. So the name is identifier for this variable, and this is a keyword, so you have to have that too. So var name equal to James Bond, and you could console log this later. You could just say var name. So right here we could go here and put it right here. Say something like var my name. I would say my name because name is could be named anything in the browser. So name, I'll say, let's say James Bond. That's not my name. And then we could just say my name here, and then it gives me James Bond. Okay, so that's how you could run. And then there is constant, which is another way of declaring variable. So you say constant first name, and then you declare it that way. So it's the same. The difference between constant and var is that constant is very strict. It doesn't allow you to change the variable. It doesn't allow you to manipulate or mutate the variable. So if you want to keep something consistently and you don't want to change it later, you just use constant. And if you try to change it, it will give you an error. So that's one way to know. And var, if you want to change it, you could change it and it will not give you an error. So those are two different things. And then there's a let, which is a little bit less strict than constant, but more strict than var. So it's in the middle. You could change the value by assigning it to something else. So you could mutate the information, but you cannot declare it. You cannot say so this was supposed to be let, but you cannot say let first name is equal to Muhammad and then let first name is equal to Ahmed. You just have to say declare it one time, and then you could assign it to something else later. So that is in general what variables are. JavaScript has three ways to declare variable: let, constant, and var. Okay. And then we talked about the JavaScript data types. So these are primitive data types. These are not advanced data types. So the primitive are string, which is just a text, numbers, which is normal numbers like whole number or negative numbers. So negative or positive numbers. Booleans is true or false. And then we have undefined and null. So these are two different ways of defining a data. So undefined means something something was not defined, was not declared. And null is if you want to set something to nothing. So null means nothing basically. So if you want something to be equal to nothing, then you just say equal to null. Okay, so this is a little more explanation of what these are. We talked about math operators. So in JavaScript, you could run math. So if we go here in our console, right here, you could run a math here. You could say 1 plus, which could just say let let add equal to, let's say 4 plus 5, and then if you get add, it will give you 9. Okay, so it adds, and you could just also declare here. You could just say 4 plus 9, and it will tell you like a calculator. There's other things that JavaScript has other than just adding something or subtracting. It has a something called a module operator, and it is this percent sign. The module operator gives you the remainder. So the remainder of two numbers. So if you take 21, how many times does 21? How many times does 5 go into 21? What do you guys think? How many times?
4.
4 times.
4
Okay.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So 4 times, and then you have a remainder of 1, and 6 goes into 21. How many times? About 3 times,
3
right?
times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that would be 18. So you have a remainder of 3. So this module thing, like if you just do that, it will give you the remainder. So we could actually test it here and just say something like, let's say something like that number and then module 40. And we have nothing because we have 0. That means 40 goes perfectly with 400. But if we say something like 421, and we say module, let's say 29 or something like that, some odd number, then we have a remainder of 15. So it doesn't matter how big the number is. You don't even care how many times it goes into it, because you have to calculate that actually. But now you know that the remainder is 15. So usually what we use this for is if we want to check if a number is odd or even. So the way to know if a number is odd or even is by just saying, okay, if the remainder is if the remainder is greater than 0, then that means it is it's a it's an odd number. Okay, so just like we did, 21 goes into 5 1. So we have 1, right? So that 1 means that this number is odd. Okay, so even if we do something like that and we just say that if there's any remainder, that means it's odd. If there's no remainder, just like we said, 400 goes into 40, then that means this number is even. So that's how you know a number is odd or even. If it returns any number, then it's odd. If it returns 0, it means it's even. So that's mainly the use that we use this for. Okay. Let me see. Someone is just sending me a message. Okay. Let's see. Okay. We'll inshallah we'll go over, and I'll go over the basics, and then after we get to a little more advanced, I will ask you guys some questions. So that is the module, and the math.pow is it's a exponent. So this is how you do it. You say math.pow and these two numbers. So you say 2 to the power of 2, it's 4, and 3 to the power of 2 is 9. So that's kind of like how it works, just an exponent. And these are other methods for math. If you want to round something, you just say math.round, and you have to write math like that by the capital because it's a method that's already built in JavaScript. So this one rounds. So these are like they show you. So this rounds to 7, so it rounds up, right? But if you say round, if you say 0.4, then it rounds down because it knows that if it's in the middle, if it's half, then round down. If it's more than half, round up. Floor and seal, these are two different. So floor means it doesn't matter how big the number is. So if it's 6.9, it rounds down. And if it's this one, it doesn't matter how small it is, 6.0, 001, it rounds up. So it's not logical. It's not good to use this unless you really have to. Okay. And then we did comparisons. So these comparisons is just equal to, greater than, or less than. So this is basically how it works. But the only thing that's different from like the usual math is this 3 equal. The 3 equal means it checks a couple of things. It checks the value, and it checks also it checks a value and a type. So how do we know that? So right here, let's test that out quickly. So let's create two. Let's have two things here. So let's say first item equal to, let's say or not first item, num1. Let's say num1 equal to 10, and then let's say num2 equal to 10. But this 10 is it's a string because we have a quote around it. So now let's add these together. Let's actually compare these together. So we should have like true or false. So if we say num1 is equal, if we do 2 equals and we say num2, then it gives us true. So it says that 10 is equal to 10 is string. And that is, I mean, that's not correct. This is a string, this is a number. But if we do the same thing, but we have 3 equals, it says false. Why? Because we know that one of them is a string. How do you know that? If we say type of, and then we put the num2 in here, it gives us the actual data type. So that's how we know. And if we do num1, it gives us a number. So you add in a number to a string, which is not good. So that's why we usually have 3 equals here. The 3 equals make sure that the two things are exactly the same. So that's the only difference. Okay. Well, so these are kind of same. This means not equal, not equal. So it's very basic. Logical operators, that we have only 2 logical operators. We have and or. So and or. So basically, let's give you an example of what that looks like. If we say something like, if we take this example, which says 100 is greater than 10, which is true. 100 is greater than 10, and 10 is equal to 10. So this should return true, right? So that's true because these two statements are true. But if we change one of the statements, if we say this one 11, it becomes false because the and is both statements has to be true. So if you have two statements, they both have to be true. If but the or right here, if we change this to or, and the or is these two pipes, so we have to write it like that, to those two pipes. The or is just, it only asks for one thing. So if it's one thing is true, then it goes, yeah, and it gives you true. So and or, just like in real world that you using, that's how you use the and or. Okay. Okay. So we'll just go over the basics now, and then when we get to the next lesson, I'll ask you guys if you have any if you could guide me basically what I'm writing. So the conditional or the control flow is the if statement. So it's just like here. So you say if, so we create a variable here, and then we said if age is greater than 15, console log true. If else, console log this. So if, and then you put a condition here. So you say if it's greater than or less than or all that. So you write all your conditions in these two parentheses, between the parentheses, and then you have else. Just like that, you also have else if. So if you want to create another condition and you want to say, okay, if age is less than or equal to another number, this is how you could create. Let me see. Let me actually just write it exactly right here. So I'm just gonna copy this. If I change that, it's gonna change the lesson from inside. So I'm just gonna use this as a temporary example. So if we want to add another and, we could do that. Another if, I mean. So you could put here if else, and then put the condition here. Okay, and then we put another bracket here. So now also closing bracket. Okay, so now we're gonna put this here, and we're gonna run another condition here. So we could just say age is less than or equal to let's say 18 or whatever. So this is another condition, and you could run as many else. I mean, this is if else else if, as many else if you want, but else has to be the last one. So this else has to be the last. So that's kind of like conditional statement. It's just you change the control flow. So the last thing would be loops. We learned a lot about loops. There's for loop, which is the one we use the most. The for loop starts with the for keyword, and then you put a condition here. So this condition is basically saying start the loop from 0, keep going until you reach right before 5, so 4, and then keep going, keep incrementing, so by 1. So this basically is just like this. So if you want to write it, we say for let I is equal to 0, and then we say as long as I is less than 5, let's say, then keep going. So we say I plus plus. Plus plus means just increment by 1. And then have to do that. Okay. Now we could just console log here I. Okay. So it gives us 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because we told it to start from 0 and go all the way up to 5. We didn't say go to 5, we just up to 5. And we could also say up to 5 by just put an equal there and run it, and it says like that. So that's for loop. While loop is exactly the same, just the difference is that while loop, you give it one condition. You don't need to do the incrementing. So the increment, I mean, you need to do the incrementing inside, but you put the condition right after while. So this is the keyword. You declare a variable outside that you want to count, let's say. So this is basically just like the for loop. We could just say this one, let I is equal to 0. So that's the starting point, and then it increments until it reaches 10, right before 10. So it's exactly the same, but this one checks the condition and then goes back and then checks the condition. So it does one thing at a time instead of the for loop does everything at once. There's also infinite loops. So that means if you don't do the conditions right, it means your whole program is going to go forever and it's going to crash. So it's going to crash your computer. So keep that in mind. So that was, I went through this fast because this is the basic, and most of you know about this. So I just wanted to get it out of the way if someone didn't understand it. So let me know if you have any question about those. We can go over it again. Okay, so now let's go to this week's information or the lessons we learned. Any particular questions you have about the assignments and things like that that we can go over before I get started on like reviewing or asking question about you guys about these? I know the most difficult one is the scope and the closure, especially closure is the hardest one. I know that because a lot of you were asking questions about it. So we can go over the closure if you like.
Instead, can you go over like functions, arrays, objects as well, real quick, just like the one you did now? Because
Okay.
my thing is like if you miss a little thing on those, it will be hard on understanding the other part.
So you wanted me to go over the function here?
Yeah, just real quick, the like you did the last.
Oh, the last one. Okay. So yeah, so functions are very very important in JavaScript because they help you put together a program and then run it as many times as you want. So that's the concept of dry. Don't repeat yourself. That's where it came from. So functions, and functions are also called the first class citizen in JavaScript because they are actually a data type, just like string and a number and things like that. They're just part of the data types, and by themselves they are also objects. So everything in JavaScript is an object. So functions are also objects. So that's just general information about functions. So the syntax for function is you start with the function keyword, and then you give it a name, and then you give it these two parentheses. So these two parentheses tell the browser that these two parentheses and also this keyword tell the browser this is not just a text, this is a function. So let's run it in JavaScript. So and then you have curly brackets. So this is one way to write, and we'll see the other way. You have a curly bracket, and inside the curly bracket, you do your you put your code there, so you can run something there. So this one is basically saying console log this message, and we call or invoke the function by taking the name of the function and then putting a parenthesis. If you don't do that, if you don't put the parenthesis, it will basically return the function itself. So let's see a quick example of that. So if we say function, let's say my fun, okay, and then just give it that and run it. So let's close it. So inside here, we could write whatever we want. So there's also you could say return, and it could return a something. So we could return like a number or information, but you could also use console log, and we could say hello world here. Okay. So that's one way. So now if we just say, okay, nothing happens, but we have to invoke the function. We have to say my fun and invoke it like that, and it gives you hello world here. So you have to invoke it like that. If we don't invoke it and we don't give it that and we just say that, it just returns the function itself like that. So that's one way. We could also do calculations inside the function. So let's see. So we could do actually it's not here, but let's see. So we could do something like this. We could say function. Let's call it add and give it num1, num2, and then close it and do here return, and then we just say num1, num1 plus num2. So now this one doesn't have anything. It has something called parameters. So these are parameters, parameter 1, parameter 2. The parameters, we need to give them a value. So when we're invoking the function, we have to give them a value. So let's invoke the function. Let's say add here. And if we do that, if we run it like this, it's not going to work. So it's not going to do anything. So we have to give it a value. We have to say something like 4 or something like 6. And then it runs this, it adds those two numbers, and it gives you that. So it's a program that you can run and keep repeating that information. Um, so there's different ways of declaring a function or writing a function. So that was one way. The other way is called functional declaration. No, not this one. Actually, functional expression. I mean, functional expression is sometimes called anonymous function. Is a way of writing the function and storing it in a variable. So this is the function. You remove the name of the function and put it here, and then store this whole function in this variable. and then you could just invoke it exactly the same way. So this is function expression or anonymous function. Um, there's also arrow function. So it's different way of writing the function. So the same function, let's say the one we just did, we could write it differently. So this one we just did a function add, function add, just like that. We could change it to an arrow function. When I say arrow function, I mean there's an arrow in in the function. So so the way we write it is we declare a variable here. We say add, and then we say equal to, and now these two parameters, we just gonna put them, we're just gonna remove the function. So let's just remove the function, and then open parentheses here, and then put num1 and num2, and then this is where the arrow comes. We put an arrow here. That's an arrow, and we keep it simple. So we're just gonna say num1 plus num2. So now we removed even the return. We removed the return. We removed these two curly brackets, and we just returned this is an arrow function, basically. It's one line. It's much, much simpler, but also confusing for some people too. So if we run that and we call the add again, it's gonna run normally. We could also change it to something else, the name. So it's different. Add to, okay. So now if we just run that function and call add to and give it two numbers, something like that, it gives us the correct number. Okay, so that's the arrow function. So those are functions. That's mainly what you need to understand about functions and how to write them. Any questions, Mohammed?
I have a question like,
Uh,
what is the difference like when you put in return or when you doing the console like which situations, which one to use?
Okay, so that's a good question. So usually return is you use it for if you want to do some work in the function. So like we just did the add, the one we just did. Let's go back to the first one. So this one, the reason we say in return is because it's doing some calculation. So every time you do something inside, let's say you have a variable inside, and you put something, so you say something let some var equal to whatever high. So now if you want to return this, you could either console log it. You don't even have to do that return. So the only difference is that return, if you do any calculation within here, it will not work. It will not work when if you do console. I mean, it will work sometimes, but let's actually see example. Let's say console here, console log, and some var. Okay, so this will work normally. So if we run that and we say add, actually we have to remove those. Okay, let's remove the parameters so they don't give us error. And we run this. Sorry. And let's call it something else. Let's say hi. Okay. All right. Let's do that. Okay. We say hi, and we run it. It gives us the hi inside, right? So that works. So now it also returns undefined, which is okay because we're in the console log. So if every time we say console log within the console log, it gives us undefined. So now if we want to do return this one, we could do the same thing, return. So you could use them same way. Let's see, return some var. Okay, return some var. Yeah, the console log is kind of difficult to work with. Some var. Okay, now enter. Let's call that function again. It gives us the same thing. Now it doesn't give us the undefined, so it's just you could use it in any way you want. But here's the thing: when you add two things, let's see. Actually, I never used it for addition. I never used a console log for adding something. So let's do the console log here and add two numbers. Console log that, and here let's add two numbers. Let's say num1 plus num2, and we have to give that as a here num1 num2. Okay. All right. So run it. Let's invoke this function high and give it like 4 and 6. Okay. So now it works. So the only difference is that sometimes you get these undefined because now the function is returning some information, but it doesn't. It's basically running the console log before it runs the sum var. So it just does its work, and then it goes back to the operation, and then every time it runs the sum var, and it knows that it's 10, but before that it runs a console log and then it says okay, sum var is undefined, and then it runs again the sum var calculation. So you could use them exchangeably, but most of the time if you're doing any calculation, use the return. If you're returning any string or message, use console log. That's the kind of like my rule basically, the way I use it. Okay. Anything else about the functions? Okay, let's go down and see other things. Okay, any questions about arrays? You guys have any questions about arrays? How they work, the array methods that we used? Okay, question. So what is the difference between arrays and objects? Can somebody tell me the difference between
You
arrays
can
and
loop
objects?
through array.
You could loop through array. Okay, I think you could also loop through objects too, right? Because remember we used the like dot map to
Not
loop.
with the for loop, right?
There is a specific way to for loop on objects. You could say loop through objects JavaScript. There's a specific way. There's actually a thing for it called for in. It's not just for loop. It's called for in. So here for, and then you get the object. No, you get a property. You could call it whatever you want, and then you say in object, and that's how you loop through it. So there is a way to loop through objects. It's not the best thing to do it, but that's one way. What other differences between arrays and objects? What about the way the arrays are created? So arrays are
That one have a array has a square bracket, and the other one has a curly bracket.
Oh, good,
Object
good.
have a yeah.
Can I do objects have a way to do objects have indexes? Can I get a index from an object?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't think so. But I know you can get the index of an array.
You get
You can get the property.
Okay. Yep. So
you can get the property of an object.
Property of an object. Okay. Yep. So this is called the property of an object. So objects have key pair value. So it has a key here and it has a value. So if you want to get it just like the array that you did the index, you use the key. So that's the difference. Okay. Another question about the difference between objects and arrays is does the order matter for objects? And which one does the order matter? Arrays and objects.
Arrays.
Arrays.
I think arrays, yeah.
Arrays order matter. How so? How does it matter? What do you guys think? How does the order matter in arrays?
I think
the index starts from 0.
Starts from 0. Okay, that's good. That's a good one. Okay.
And I think because the arrays have like multiple multiple items
Mm-hmm.
that kind of relate to each other.
Okay. So arrays, right? Arrays. So you started with the first one, which was it starts with 0. So arrays have index. So if you change it around, the index changes. So like here, where was it? We have 0, 1, 2, 3. So if you move chocolate chip to the end, it becomes like it has the 3. So it's not 0 any longer. So it changes the how the operation basically. What are you expecting, right? But when it comes to objects, it doesn't matter, because if we actually create this now, let's put this in the console log, clear that. You'll see that when we do that and call it again, user, it's let's see, it's all over the place. You see now here the first one is user, but this one, the first one, is favorite number, right? And there's a live JavaScript, which was supposed to be like the last, second to the last one. So order doesn't matter, right, in objects. Okay, what else can I ask about objects? Let me see my notes. I just want you guys to know about the important things about these things. Access to array method. Okay, can I use the same array methods like this? Can I do like in objects? Can I say like the object we just got? Can I say users, user dot? Can I say user dot and then use the methods? What do you guys think?
No, that's for array, not for object.
It's only for arrays. Okay, so these methods are only for arrays. Okay, so let's actually try one. There are some methods that they share. I think the only one, I think it's like the length. Let me try that. Length. Yeah, so it will not work. So there is actually a specific methods for objects, but these are only for arrays. Okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the arrays. Any questions about arrays and objects, how they work, what they do, all that stuff? Question: how do you access an object? Example, I want to access like password. How do I show password here?
User you can use the dot,
Dot notation.
yeah, you can use the dot
Okay.
notation. You can say dot, then you can choose which one you wanted to get access to.
Good. So use a dot, a password. Good. Okay. Let's say I want to put let's actually put an array. So let's say something like let's say our array. I'm gonna create array, but this array will have I want to write it somewhere else that makes a little more sense. Okay, let's go to Rebel. Let's create a new Rebel. It's a little more convenient. So Rebel is the way you can run JavaScript or any other programming language. It's opening. So I wanna create let's create my array, and then open the array. But also I want to put objects here. So I want to say something like let's put like ID 1. Let's put like name. Let's put something like Ali. Let's put like location. Minnesota. Let's say something like that. And let's copy this for like 2 or 3 times because I want to ask a couple of questions of how we can access this. Okay, let's change this to Ahmed. Let's say something like Ohio. 2 and 3 Let's say this one, let's say something like Hamdi, and give this like Seattle. Okay. So now how do I access Ahmed information? How can I show it here, Ahmed's information? Somebody walk me through that. I wanna show this object right here.
Array.ahmed.
My array.
My array, then dot. Is it dot or the square bracket? Square bracket, I guess.
Square bracket.
Square bracket. Okay. What should I do with the square bracket?
You
ID.
give. I'll say not ID. I think it's the key value pair. It is the value. I don't know. I'm kind of confused. So I know there's one they're called keys and the other one value. So you have to use one of them, not the one.
Yep. So usually you use keys.
Name. Yeah, name.
Keys. So we put names here. Name. Okay.
And then what else? What do you even create with a name?
What is that?
I didn't know you had name in there.
Yeah. We have the name and location and ID. So now, if you call this, do you guys think it's gonna run? Or how do you know this is Ahmed? Because we have 3 people with a name. Should we
index
say
of 1, ID 1?
Index of 1 here after this?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's dot name now.
Dot name. Okay.
No, dot.
Or before the index, say dot name. What do you guys think?
No, I don't think that's right.
Okay, so now we're trying to access this object, and we're in an array. So first we have to go through the array, and then grab this object. So think of array as think of this as having index 0, index 1, this, and this. Let me just. And this one has an index 2, right? So these are just different arrays, basically, each one of them. So this is like just saying, let me just copy this. This is just like saying, instead of that, we could just say Ahmed here. Ali, Ahmed, and then Hamdi. Okay, Hamdi. So it's just like that, but now it's an object. Okay, now it's an object. So this one is an object. This one is an object. So how do we access like Ahmed in here? This one. So let's put it to it. How do we access this one and get Ahmed? And remember, this is just a normal array like that.
My array. Then you choose. Yeah. You use
my array 2.
Then index of 1 or index of 1. Yeah, I guess.
Index of 1. Okay. So now let's just console log this. Let's see what it gives us. So Ahmed, it gives us Ahmed. So index of 1. And this one 0, 1, 2, right? So how do we grab this whole thing just like we just did in this one? Remember, this is just a one thing, just like Ahmed, right? So we do the same thing. We just target my array only, and we target the same thing. And now if we run it, it should give us this whole object, right? It gave us the whole object, right there, this whole object. So now we have the object. We could access anything in the object using the dot notation, right? So if we say dot name, it should give us Ahmed, because we're targeting this, and we're targeting the second index, right? So that's how you access a object within an array. Okay, so each object is a one array, one item in the array. I mean, right? So this is important because it'll probably come up in the Spring project. Okay, so that was a good exercise about arrays. Any question about arrays and objects so far? Let me look if we. Okay. We could do methods, but that's only if you guys have a question about methods. So who can tell me about who can tell me what are methods in object? What is a method? So let's say we have an object here. Let's grab one of the objects in here, like this. Put it in here. Okay. So how do I add method here, and what is a method to start with?
Method as a function, right?
Method is a function, right? Okay, good. That's a good one. Okay. So it's a normal function. Okay. Where do we put this function? Let's say we want to say something like this person says anything. So my password is blah blah. We want to say that. So where do we put that?
Inside the curly bracket.
Inside the curly bracket. Okay. So we'll give it something like say something, right? Okay.
And then then function. Just create a function. Yeah.
Normal anonymous function. Okay. And now we'll just return, right, the message. Okay. So you can say whatever you want here. So we're just gonna say you say hi, my password is nobody ever says this. So my password is, and what should we use here to grab the information? We want to grab password.
$sign and curly bracket.
Okay, template literal. Okay, so what do we put in the template literal?
The password, just password.
Just password. Okay.
Yeah.
Does everyone agree with that? Remember, we want to tell this where this password is coming from, right?
User
So this function doesn't know what password is right now. I mean, it sees password, but it's not a variable, so it cannot grab it.
So you have to say this dot password.
This dot password, right? So now, what does this refer to?
To the user.
Okay.
Refers to the object, right? The whole object. So remember how we said when you want to call an object, you use a dot notation. So this one is basically saying user dot password, right? So just like in real world, we use this object to use this. So I mean in JavaScript. So if you say this mouse belongs to me, so you basically point into the mouse itself and the person who belongs to. So so let's run it. Let's say console log user dot say something. Should we leave it like that to call it? Do you think it's gonna print this message? What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Is it gonna print this message if I run it now? Like this?
User that says something. No, the whole function.
Okay, the function. Okay. So we have to invoke the function, right? We have to tell, okay, run this function. So if we run it, it says, hi, my password is that. Okay. Okay. So that's called method. It's a function inside the object. If the function is outside the object, it's just a normal function. So this could be a normal function. We could put it outside like this. And instead of that, we just say equal to, and we have to give this a variable. We have to make it a variable. So now it's an anonymous function, but it's a normal function outside. And now this will not work because it doesn't know what this is referring to. Yeah. So we have to say here user instead of this. That's how it knows. Okay. Let's see. Anything else about objects and think we took enough time with the objects. So we have a lot to cover. So let's go back to the lessons. So now we have scope, closure, and these left, these three. Okay. Any questions about you guys have this about these? Any questions?
You said right now you showed us a function inside object, right? And then
Yes.
this one. And the one before that was like object in array.
Yes.
So
Yes.
one of the things I was confused, like how they interact and exchange each other,
Right.
and if you figure out that maybe we are able to now how to call it.
Yes. So usually, I mean, the thing is like usually when you learn it right now, if I give you an array which has objects, I will not put a method inside because that will confuse you, and that will make it so that it's harder to keep track of everything in an array. So everything will be nested together. So usually when we use this, it's just when we're learning objects. So just think of this as a separate thing. So when we declare here one object, another object, that's just one way of declaring. Later on in later classes, you will learn how to like access a deeper method. So a deeper item. So this array will have an object. The object will have an array, right? Like that. And sometimes even at the end of this school, you might have to access an object within that array. So that would be something that would be interesting. But now just think of it as just these are different items in the array. And this is separately, this is only learning an object. Okay. So this is separate and this is separate. Okay. So don't think too much of this. Think of it as just normal items, just like this. This is an array. If we want to put Hibel Ahmed or something like that, that you know how to access that. So if we want to put an object here, just the same way you access a string, that's how you access it. So keep it simple. Okay. Any questions about scope and closure specifically? Scope and closure. Let's go over a little bit the scope, because I know a lot of people were confused about the scope, and I think that's kind of like the most like painful one for most students to think of it. So we're gonna keep it simple. We're gonna keep it simple. The scope, I think most of you understand. Scope is we have a different type of scope. Scope means where you're gonna find your variable or your function. So if it's in outside, it's a global scope. Let's say this one is a global scope, so it's not connected to anything. If it's inside a function, it's a functional scope. That's all you need to understand about the scope right now. Those are two things to understand. Hoisting, you will not come across most of the time. Hoisting is basically it works with functions most of the time. So and also variables. It's basically declaring the function or invoking the function before the function is created. And then JavaScript knows how to go down and see there is a function that was created, and then come back and also execute this. So it's pretty smart. So let's go through scope. Okay, keep it really simple. Let's just go through here. Closure, not scope. Closure. Okay, so let's keep it really simple and give you a basic closure example. So let's say something like function. Let's say something like say hi. Okay, we can even a simple. And this function, we just create normal function, and then we're console login hi. So this is basic function. You already know this one. So now anything inside the function is called, it's in the lexical scope of the function, or is enclosed in the function. So if we put a variable here, we say let var equal to, let's say 20. Okay, so not let var, not let num1 equal to 20. Okay, so now this is inside the function. It's a functional scope. Okay, if we create another function inside and grab this, then that becomes a closure. Okay, so if we say return function, okay, it could be anonymous function, it doesn't matter, and we just say this one returns return num1. Okay, that's it. So now this function is enclosed or is in the closure of this function, and it's doing its job because it's basically working normally, but we cannot access it from outside. So remember that in closure, you could only let me just actually write the notes we wrote in the lecture. When a function reaches outside of its scope, okay, reaches outside of its scope, which is this is the functional scope, and if it reaches outside here, then it's a global scope. Okay, reaches outside to grab a value, to grab a value, to grab a value. That is the global scope. Okay, global scope. But the one thing to know about the closure is that we can only pass things down but not back up. Okay, we cannot pass things back up. So now you could call this variable from inside, but if you have a variable here, let's say let num2 equal to whatever 10, you cannot grab that variable. This function cannot grab that variable because it's enclosure. It's enclosed in this inner function. So this inner function is protecting that. And if we want to grab something like from here, this function will not allow us, and it's protecting everything in here. So it's protecting this function and it's protecting everything inside. So it will not allow us to grab something from outside. So that's enclosure. That's the kind of like what we talked about. The name, what the name says, closure means you enclosing things together. But that's one way. So now this is a closure. This is a closure, different type of closure that's inside this function. So it's enclosure to this function, and this one is enclosure to this function. So that's generally.
Okay, which one is lexical scope?
So when we say lexical scope, let's actually read it. So here's the lexical environment or lexical scope. Every time the JavaScript engine creates an execution context, which is, we explained here what execution context is. Execution context is every time the function runs, JavaScript creates a small space in the JavaScript engine for that function. So that's the execution context, is that space that was created for that function. Okay. So it creates a function scope. Okay, it also creates a new lexical environment to store a variable defined in that function. So basically what JavaScript does, every time you run a function, let's say you run this function, it creates a little space for that function, and then it creates another space where we can store these information. So these variables, and that's called the lexical environment or lexical scope. So it's not something that's foreign. It's just that the background inside JavaScript, it's running different things. It's basically creating space for the function. It's creating a space for the inner function. And I actually saw something that make a little more sense. Let me actually grab, let me say closure, visual, okay, JavaScript. I saw something that looked really nice that explained it better. Where was it? Okay, let's see. It was pretty easy graphic that showed the layers of closure. So let's just say closure JavaScript. Where was it? So think of a closure as like an egg. As you can see here, this one is one example. You have a function and you have variables here and whatever you want to declare inside the function. And this is the closure. You basically taken all the variables of the function, all the functions that you put inside this function, you put in it, you're making it a closure. Okay, let me just I'm looking for that example. Hopefully I found it. It was pretty nice. Oh, it's right here. Okay. So right here, so this graphic, as you can see here, it has a couple of things. So the outer layer, this layer, is the global scope. Okay. So everything you declare here is the global scope. You have a function here. This is the outer function. So it's called outer function by the name of it. Inside here, the outer function has access to the outer function var. So it has access to here, to the global scope. Okay. It doesn't have any access to what's inside its closure. So now inside this function, everything inside it is called closure. So this is the closure of this function, right? But it doesn't have access to it. So you have to return anything in here in the closure, right? So, but this function has access to the variables here and the variables here, and that's also closure. So it's kind of confusing, but it's everything inside the function is a closure. Think of it like that, easy way. So everything in here is a closure, right? So this function has access to this, but this function doesn't have access to this. So keep it simple. It's just like that. So think of it as just things have access to other things. Some things don't have access to other things, you know? Sometimes we try to complicate things, but really basically is if you see this bracket, it means outside kind of have access to it. So right here we have another one. The outside, it doesn't matter the function or outside, they don't have access to it. So that's all you need to think of. Think of these as gates of like if you have like a houses, this is a gate for the house. You cannot just go in, you have to have permission, right? So this is a closure, right? There's another one that we covered, which was the reference closure, but that's taken a little bit farther and using it for something else, right? So this is a closure, this is a closure, and also this function is a closure. Okay. Any questions about how this is set up and what is a closure? Right.
So the function at the top has access to the function at the bottom.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It can't go the other way. So the bottom one cannot
No, it's
be
it's the reverse. Sorry, it's the reverse.
Okay.
Yeah. So this function inside has access to here, has access to here, but this function has access only to here and outside.
Okay.
It doesn't have access to inside here. Right.
I see.
So it's the reverse. So like here, we can only pass things down. So we can things can be accessed from here. Things in here can be accessed from here, but it cannot go the other way. So I think more explain a little bit better. Okay, so any questions about the setup of so here's the thing about closures. It takes time to understand. So it's not something that just you get right away. So don't worry about if you don't understand it right away. So it takes time. So all you need to understand is how things are working together. Okay, can you have access to here or here? That's all you need to know. You don't need to know the background of how this is happening. So that's the basic of closure. We could do the one that is a counter if you guys want. That's the one that's a little more advanced. The counter one. But that's closure. And you could watch a couple of videos about closure and try to understand what it is. Okay. And it comes down to the scope, basically. It comes down to the scope, where things are. A global scope, functional scope. And then here's another functional scope, right? That's pretty much it. So any questions about the closure in general? Okay. Yeah, this subject is not easy, but it takes time. It took me about like 6-7 months for me to even like understand what closures are. So you're fine if you don't understand it right now. Okay. So that's closure. Let us go and cover the other subjects. If you guys don't have any questions about them. So advanced arrays or array methods, you guys, most of you got this one, so that's good. Let me just go over what they are basically. So arrays, we actually talked about arrays. Remember how the arrays had dot length, dot pop, things like that. So now arrays, we have advanced arrays that were created in the JavaScript. So they are functions that were already created, and they are higher order function. Okay, and I don't think we touched on higher order function, but we're gonna touch it right now. So before we get to the advanced arrays, what do you guys think about callbacks? So let me actually just write notes about callbacks, and you guys guide me what it is. Okay, callback functions. Okay, give me information about callback functions. What do you guys know about them?
It is, I think it is a function that can be passed as
As a
a
parameter.
parameter.
Okay, function that can be passed as a parameter.
Yes, to another function.
What's the parameter to another function? Okay, good. So callbacks are functions that can be passed as a parameter to another function. Okay, what about high order functions? What are they? What do you guys think? What is a high order function?
So the function itself that receives high callbacks is a high order function because it takes a function.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a function as a parameter. No, argument as an argument, I guess.
Okay.
And it has the callback
You
within it.
have parameter and argument. One is for the callback. One is for the high order.
Okay, that's good. You guys are in the similar space, so that's good. So the callbacks, okay. So the callbacks and high order functions are connected in some way, right?
Right. The high order function has the callback within the argument.
Within the argument.
Within the,
Somebody,
within
can somebody walk me through a simple example of a high order function to start with?
you can do function, let's say a function, let's just do
Add.
any name, just do something like maybe
let's
do
actually
like
add.
function.
Let's do calculator. Calculator.
Okay.
That's the spelling. Okay.
Okay. And then you could do like perm1 comma perm2, and then your
Param stands
callback,
for parameter. Okay.
and then callback. You can call this like
Okay.
math or something. I don't know. Or just callback.
Math. Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
math. Okay.
So now, what do we return in here?
And then you return math, and then you return the perm1, perm2.
Perm2. Okay. We might have issue with the word math because it's already built in
Okay.
JavaScript. So we'll say something like our math. Let's say something like that.
What if we say callback? Because we know it's callback.
We could say that too. What do you guys think? Should we say this
It's
callback?
not confusing. It's it kind of helps you. It's callback.
It's callback itself. Okay, that's also fine too.
Yeah.
Okay, callback. So that's the callback, where this is a high order function, and it takes a parameter as with another function. So this is a function that we didn't create yet, and we're just invoking it. So every time this function runs, it invokes this function. That's all it does. That's its job. Okay, let's create the callback. Can somebody walk me through a callback function? What do we start with a callback function? It's a normal function. Think of it as a normal function.
All right. Let add equals.
Equal to, okay.
Then bracket.
Okay.
Parenthesis,
Do
not
you want to do
parenthesis.
arrow function or you want to do normal function?
Arrow function, I guess. Arrow function is maybe
Okay, go ahead, no
arrow
problem.
function. Then arrow. Just create an arrow.
No, you're gonna put the para one in there.
Oh yeah, you have to put those prompt 1, prompt 2, but
Prom 2, okay.
yeah. And then say arrow equal to prompt 1, prompt plus prompt 2.
Okay, we open here bracket or just do it? Okay. Oh,
No,
you mean okay?
Just
We're just gonna keep it
just right
simple.
there.
All right, keep it simple. Prompt 2. Okay. So this is the arrow function. So basically, what it's doing is it's called, the function is called add, and it has 2 parameters, and it's adding those 2 parameters. Okay. So how do we execute them? This thing.
we say return.
The term
Yeah, return.
or return. Okay, right here.
Yeah, and then
Well, we already returned, right?
We finished with this function, so this one's done. This
we
one
did
is
the return. We just have to call it the calculator.
okay. We
and
call the
to-
function, right? Calculator. Okay, and then give
and
it.
then we're gonna run the
from
2 numbers and how
2
was
numbers,
it?
something like that. Okay.
And then
what else do we give?
and then run the add.
Add. Okay. Should we leave it like that? Okay. Let's
But
we put parentheses there.
I think you have to put the calculator. It's kind of it doesn't look right. It's something
Okay.
look off.
Now put 2 parentheses in the add.
Right, like that.
Yeah.
Okay. We could run and see how that works out. Okay. Let's run it. Hopefully it returns something. Says callback is not a function. Line 10. Okay, we actually did that. So now it's giving us an error saying callback is not a function. So it's basically saying this is not a function yet. So should we remove this and see that how that works? Maybe test that out. Okay. So basically what it was doing is when we did this, we don't have access to here. So you're basically saying, okay, give me access to this function, and it's telling you no, because you're in the curly brackets, you don't have access to it. You're trying to execute it before you even get the function, right? So now all we do is here. The reason why we do this and not execute it here, so you're invoking it right here. The reason we don't invoke it, because now it doesn't look like a function here. So we're just passing some information. That's all we're doing. We're not executing it. So we're passing this information right here. We don't care if it's a function or not right now. But it's gonna take here and it's gonna consider it as a function and run it, right? But it's gonna think, okay, but this callback, where do I get the information from? Okay, it's right here. So we add in these 2 right here, and the numbers is right here, the prom 1, prom 2. Okay, so if we execute it here, it doesn't know that function actually exists. It thinks this is a normal variable. Okay, so that's why I said this function doesn't exist. Any questions about callbacks, how they work? This is a callback function. We're telling this high order function, we need to give you these 3 things: num1, num2, or prom1, prom2, any 2 variables, any 2 things, numbers, and then we give it a function, and we told it, okay, we will give you a function later, but execute it here right now. We're gonna create that function later, and we'll pass to you. So we're just promising that that information. We're saying, okay, we'll give you later. Don't worry about it, but just execute it right now. And when we invoke this function, when we invoke it, we have to pass a function because we already told like, hey, we're gonna give you a function that takes these 2 parameters, right? Does that make sense? Okay. Any question about callback so far before we move on? Okay, let's erase this. All right. We ran out of time, but
I just had a question about the. You know how you had one. I think you did it one as an example. So you kind of create you create a function to how do I say, to keep track on other function. So it's gonna give you 1, 2, 3 by calling it
okay. So
multiple times.
that was the closure. Okay.
That's called closure. That's
yeah.
the part that I don't understand.
Okay, let me just give that a quick example of that. Okay. Let's give it a quick example. So it's actually usually it's called counter closure function. So this example is really famous because it does keep track of a number in the computer memory. So let's actually get something that they will not allow me to read these because I already looked at a bunch of them. Let's see. Yeah, so it's something like this. So okay, so I'm just getting a example here step. So let's create something like that. Let me comment this out. Let's create something like that. So this is the closure. We're going back to the closure quickly. Closure, and we're using counter. Okay. So first you create the general function. So you say here counter. We give it a value here. I mean, you could give it a value if you want. You don't have to. We could just open this, and we could say let score, like we learned in the class, score is equal to 0. And now we're gonna return another function that keeps increments this number. The interesting thing about this number that returns a number that increments, and we're just gonna say score plus plus, and then return score. The interesting thing about this function here is that every time we call the outer function, it has a memory of what happened. So now that memory is stored in the JavaScript engine or JavaScript machine. So so if we have to save it in a reference. So it will not work if we just say counter and we just do that. It will not work now. So if you run it, it will just give us a function thing. And even if we put it in a console log, it will not work. The reason why this is not working, let's just run it. Okay, the reason why this is not working is because it's returning a function, right? So we just told this counter to return this function. So that's what's giving us. It's giving us a function, but it doesn't know what to do with that function because we didn't execute it yet, right? Any question about that so far before we move on to how to run it? So just like we said a variable, so we set a variable here. This function is just like a variable, so it's inside this function. But we're saying okay, run it right after we call this function, right? But it cannot run because it doesn't have. We have to write this function inside here, and then execute it. We're not executing it yet, and this is a way to write it. So if you want to keep track of something, if you want to keep track of this score. So now we're gonna save it in a variable. We say let our score, let's say, or yeah, our score. Let's call it our score. It's equal to counter. Now this creates a reference now. So what it does is our score is this function, right? So let me get my. So every time we run this function, it goes here and it returns this function. And then it takes this whole function, the execution, the result of this function, and it takes it and it stores it in a outer score, right? So that's the process. So now if we just run our score, so let's say our console log, our score as a function, it should return like 1. right? The interesting thing is that this actually is already saved in the JavaScript engine. So it knows that there is a number that we incremented. If we call it again, it's going to say, okay, 1, 2. Okay, I already know you had. So this number, this function is keeping track of that. That's its job. So any questions about that? Right? So, and this is, you have to write it like that. You have to store it in a variable. Okay. So this is a closure. This is a closure. This function is a closure. This is score thing is a closure. So they're all enclosed in the outer function. The outer function doesn't know what's happening inside this function. It cannot grab anything inside this function. But this function is saying, okay, the outer function cannot reset my score. So this function by itself, if we actually do like that, we say score plus plus, and we just console log this. We're just executing this outer function without the callback function. I mean, not the callback, without the inner function. It's just gonna work. It's gonna work. It's gonna say 0 because the score is 0. But every time we call it, it's gonna say 0. It cannot increment. We could actually say here, we could say here plus. Let's say is equal to score plus 1. Right? It runs 1. Okay, 1 time. Again 1. It will not increment. Every time it resets it to 0, and it just keeps going back.
What if you copy the console log to call it 2 times?
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah. 3 times. Okay, let's do 3 times. And run it. I don't know why my browser freeze. It says 111, right? So that's actually what I meant. Thank you for correcting me. So if you call it multiple times, it will not remember that there was a score. So it resets to 0 every time. So this function doesn't store in the memory. It just runs and it's done. So it returns everything and it's like, I'm done with the work. But the one we had before, the inner function says, okay, thank you for giving me this this number. I'm gonna keep track of it, and I'm gonna keep it in the memory, right? So it's gonna keep it in the memory. So this function keeps it in memory. So that's its job. So that's all there's to it, the counter. And if you're confused about it, always just Google it, like I just Googled it, and you see how it looks like. So inner function, and then the outside, you save it in a variable, and the one you want to increment has to be outside of this inner function so that you could increment it. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Yeah. So do you guys have any question about array methods and these things? Should we go over it? Let's actually take a vote. Because we ran out of time and we cannot cover everything. So let me run a poll. Should we go over array methods? Array methods, okay. I'm just gonna give it 2 answers, yes or no. Okay, submit. Okay, go ahead, reply to that. It's in the Slack. Let's see what you guys say. I mean, we don't have a lot of people here, but okay. Maybe some people don't wanna talk. They're maybe just watching it. So I wanted to give different option to do input. So I see one vote that said no. You guys, okay, yes, okay. All right. Okay. So it's a 50-50 now. All right, let's see. How about we do like one example of each, quick example of each. Okay. Let's grab data like this data. I see it's 50-50, but that means we have to do it. Okay. So who can tell me how many? Okay, let's actually start with. Let's do map to start with. How do we map over this data? How do we show all this data in here? Okay, who can walk me through the map function?
Data.map.
Okay, data.map. Okay. All right.
Parenthesis,
Okay.
and then function, then parenthesis. And you can say item or element.
Okay, element. Let's say element. Okay.
And
then open the function.
Open the function. And just console log item or element. I mean, I think that should work.
All right, let's run it. Okay, good. So now it looped through every item. So map is basically looping. Map is equal to like for loop. Okay, it's exactly like for loop. This element is like the I in the for loop that we are accustomed to. Okay, so
well, you can call one by one then, right?
You could also call them by one, right? Okay, you could do that. So how do we call the first one basically? Let's say. So the first one. How do we call it? Is by maybe this one you guys didn't maybe pay attention, or maybe I didn't teach you well. If you want to have the index, so now we have each element in the array, in this array. If you want to have index, you could have a second item here and we call it index, right? And now if we want to call each one of them, we could just say index here. So now it's calling all of it once, but now
you teach us.
Yeah, now it's gonna run. I mean, it says undefined. We have to kind of return it here. Return. I'm not sure if that's gonna run. So return, and then we have to save this in an array. But if we cancel log, let's cancel log only index itself. Cancel log index. We cancel log index, so it's a 0, 1, 2, 3. 0.
Oh, the thing is the square bracket. You don't. I think you don't put the square bracket. I guess.
You could put a square bracket. So let's say if we want to call the first one, I mean, you don't even have to do that because it's already looped through. So if you want to get the first one, you could just say elements or element dot. You could grab something from here. You could say something like state. Okay. So that should give us so it gives us each one of them. So you could also do normal. You could put a basic hard coded. You could say 0, and that will grab the first one only. Okay, it gave us error. Kind of have a property of. Okay. So it's not giving us, but I think it's just the console log. But if you could grab all the states like that. Any questions you guys have about the map before we move on? And you could store this. The reason why it's giving us like that is because we didn't store it in a variable, and that variable will become a new array. So you can store it here. Let's say my states, and then if you console log states, you can return here. Console log this in, and then console log it here. My states. You should like give a new array here with all the states. Okay. Let me see. Somebody send a message. You're welcome, Khadija. Okay. So that's a map. What else do we have here? We have filter. We have for each and reduce. Which one should we do? We can do another one. Actually, let's quickly do the other ones too, because that's what I said at the beginning. Let's do filter. Filter is basically who can actually walk me through filter? It's basic same as the map. What should we do?
Well, if you do the same as map, it will return the same thing, I guess.
Let's say we want to filter states or cities with the most more than 50,000 people, right? So we just give it a variable. We call it let. Let's say something like big city. Okay, and then what should we do to start with the filter?
You grab the item, data, and then you call the function, the method now on it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you run a callback function inside the parenthesis.
Callback function. Okay, and here we're gonna grab each item, right, or element you said earlier. It's the same thing. Now we're just gonna return the data that we're looking for. So we're looking for more than 50,000 people. How do we do that? What should we do? We can start with the return. Okay. What should we do? We want to return population more than 50,000. So
just the population and then greater than.
Okay, population greater than 50,000, like that.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys think that's the correct syntax? We could console log this if you big city. Okay, let's see. Gives us an error. It says population doesn't exist. It's not defined. It doesn't know what population is. How do we tell the callback function where the population came from? What does this element stand for?
The element dot. Can you say element dot population then?
Yeah, because element is each item like that. Each one of them is an
What if I said element dot population? So it will grab only population.
Element dot population. Okay, that's good. So now let's run it. Yep. So that worked because we're checking each one of them, right? Element stands for each one of them. So we're checking population over 50,000, and that's what we got. We got the we got about 2 of them, 3 of them, no 4. Yeah, 4 of them. Let's make this one bigger. Let's make it like maybe like 70,000. Is that 70? Yeah, 70,000. And run it. We got yeah, still more. Let's see. Let's say 100,000. Okay. So we should have about nothing, maybe. There's nothing more than. No, actually, it's not working because it's returning. It's returning, even if we said 70,000, it's returning more than what we asked for, right? So there's something wrong there here. So what is wrong? What do you guys think? It's returning 84,000. It's returning 46,000, right? Actually, this is not 46,000, right? This is 46 million. Is it? No, it's not 46,000. Okay, so something is wrong here. What do you guys think?
So are we trying to return, this is less than 70,000?
So we're returning cities with more than 70,000 people.
More than 70,000? Okay.
Okay, so I think it's supposed to give us only the cities, not the whole thing, right?
In where? Where should we give cities? Here?
In the console log, it should give us all the Seattle, New York, things like that, not the whole object.
It's giving us the whole object now because we didn't say give us the cities. We just said Okay,
Okay.
give us.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
do we do like population dot city?
We could do that, but if we say that, it's gonna check this. It's gonna say New York. So now if we say dot city, basically you're basically seeing now, give me the city that's more than 70,000, but it's gonna say New York is it's comparing New York and the 70,000. That's what it's doing. It's not comparing the number, these numbers, right?
Okay.
That's why we had the population here, is because population is a number here. This number.
Right, right.
So
Let's see. Oh, not item.
what if we use if statement inside? What do you guys think? Instead of this.
Yeah, yeah.
So we could say if if this is true. So if this is true, let's say something like let's say return, let's say the city name maybe. So let's say element dot city. Okay. So now let's run that. Still returning that.
I'm still returning the state.
The console log you call the big cities, right? Shouldn't your console log inside the within the if statement?
You could do that too. So let's get rid of this and get rid of this. We could console log this. Okay, that's one way to do it too, right? But now it's returning all of them, and we said 70,000. This is I think we're this is way more than this is way more. This is 6 million, right? So we have to say more than 7 million. So we have to add one more. Okay, that's where it was coming from. Just our knowledge, our knowledge of the numbers. So now the only place that's more than 7 million is New York, right? So it was just the numbers actually that was wrong.
Okay.
So there's different ways to do it. You could store it in a variable. You could console log it. You could push it into a new array here. So you could just say here, let big city equal to empty array. How do we push this information to this this array? Dot bush. Okay. So we want to say we want to grab the big city array, and then say dot push, and then push the cities that are more than 7 million to that array. But now it's going to give us an empty because we have to console log that big city. Right. It's going to give us a new array that has New York in it. Okay. Any questions about filter? How it works?
I have a question, Stan.
Hey, go ahead.
Right now, you give us like two ways you can fix it. Either you use new array or use as a arrow function.
Yeah.
Now, which one? What is the easiest way to do it normally?
So it just depends on what I ask for. So if you have a problem that has is asking for, okay, return a new array. So if I say something here, return a new array with the cities bigger than 7 million. If I say something like that, then this is how you do it, right? But if I say something like return the cities that are bigger than 7 million, then you don't return, and you just return, you console log it in here, right? So it just depends on what I ask for. Okay. Any questions about the filter? We will do reduce, and then inshallah we'll call it when it comes to these functions. So the reduce is it's in the name, so it reduces numbers together. So it returns only one value, right? So who can remind me what two things do I need in reduce? you need two things for reduce to work. So let's put here.
One of them is
Accumulator.
accumulator.
Okay. So now let's
And
let's get the data, reduce. They're all same system. So I'll not ask again to. So here, what do we need?
Accumulator and current value.
Okay. Accumulator will shorten as ACC, current value. Okay. Now this is a callback function, so we'll open it. There's another piece of information we need, a piece of a thing that we need to put in reduce before we do anything. Who remembers what it is?
The start point.
The starting point. The starting point, which is 0, right?
Yeah.
So the starting point, you have to have the starting point, otherwise you can have errors. So now accumulator, who can so what is current value? Let's describe what the current value is. What is the current value? What is it similar to when it comes to map these? What is it similar to?
Index.
Index is similar to index. Okay. It's actually, when I have it over it, it shows you what is trying to do. It's trying to get all the information. So I would say it's, I mean, index, there is a way to get the index, but it's also similar. It's similar to the element, I would say, because it's grabbing each information from here, the data. Okay.
Variable.
What about the accumulator?
So the accumulator, that's interesting one. The accumulator, just like the name says, it accumulates the data that we're trying to get. So we're getting the, let's say, the numbers. We want to know how many people live in all these cities. It accumulates all those numbers together for us, starting from 0, right? So let's put it here. Accumulator is adds everything together, all numbers together, starting from 0. Okay. So whatever the current value brings, it adds the previous current value, basically. And I think we've seen an example of that too. So now all we need to do is return. So how do we return a correct, what is the correct syntax for returning something in reduce? And we want to target the population. So to return, we need to return the accumulator and also the current value, right? Both those we need to return. So I'm going to say accu, and then we're going to add the current value, right? But this is not going to work. Who can tell me why this is not going to work? From here, as you can see here, the current value. Okay, what is the current value? Let me actually console log the current value itself. So you know that if it's going to work, if it's going to give us a number, we need a specific number. So let's say current value here. Let's just actually get rid of the return, run it. So current value is each item, and we could give it a mark here, say current value. So we know what's what. So it's gonna return. So it says current value is this, current value is this, current value is this. So each object is the current value, right? So if we returned like by itself, add the accumulator, it will not work because you're adding 0 to this whole object, right? You need to target.
You said the whole population.
You need to target
population.
that population. You need to return the population. So return accu plus, and you could call accumulator whatever you want, and also the current value, you could call it whatever you want. You just have to have two items.
Accu equals or plus, or
Okay.
you're gonna use, okay.
Yeah, you could call it whatever. And this one we're gonna call the population, right? Because we wanna add all of them together. So now we have to save it in a variable, because we either have to console log inside or save it in a variable. So let's say all population equal to, let's console log that. Okay, let's run it. It should give us one number, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is all the value, all the population added together. Okay. So there's I can give a console log here for each, for both the, just like we did last time. Console log. This is the accumulator. Okay, and put here a Q, and also do another console log. This is an easier way to see it. What's happening? This is the current value. Current value. I'll put here current value dot population. I have to say that too. Okay. So now if we run it, it should show us what's happening. So if I bring it back, bring it here, you see it starts with 0, which we said do that. Accumulate starts 0. The current value, it grabs the first city, the number of first city, and then accumulator becomes the same because it adds 0 to the current city. And then value runs, so they run in tandem basically. Current value runs, and then accumulator runs and says, okay, I have the previous information, let me add to this, and this is it. So now, and then current value runs, and the accumulator runs and says, okay, let me add the previous ones together. So that's how you get the last number basically, if that makes sense. Okay. So that's accumulate, that's reduce how it works. Okay. Any questions? How do you make this?
No.
All right. Let's move on. I think we did a filter, map, and reduce. So I think that, let me know if you guys have any questions, any writing, anything, whatever way you want.
What about the for each?
For each is very similar to map.
Map. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. We could actually look at it. Where is it? We didn't even cover it in here. Let's see. For each. For each is very similar to map. We could just quickly write it, the syntax. So we could just say here, we could say let something like, let's say all cities is equal to data dot for each, and then function return item, and then just open it and then say return item dot city, right? And now if we console log this, it's gonna loop over each one of them, all cities. So if we run that, it gave us a, okay. So for each, let me see if I did it right. Oh, I don't think we have the data. We have it. Data. Okay. All cities. Let me just console log it inside. Let me console log item first. So sometimes you just have to make sure everything is running correctly. So it brings each one of them. If we say dot city. Yep, so it returns. Another thing, I think for each doesn't return an array, a new array, it mutates the old array. That's one thing to avoid.
But inside there, you can say city something equal to item.city, and then you can return it later, right? It'll give you the same thing instead of console log.
Yeah, you could console log it outside too. You mean like return it, like the normal way?
Yeah, return it inside the console log. Not return it, just set it to into declare
variable. Okay.
Yeah, variable. Put in a store in this variable. So let variable my city is equal to item.city, and then outside console log.
Oh yeah, you mean outside we have we declare.
No. You're right. Just all you gotta do is console log outside.
We cannot cancel like cities outside.
Oh, okay. All right, I got you.
In the
Cause
function.
all
But
right. So
what we could do is we
it's
could
a
say
loop. You loop.
let
Yeah.
cities, and then declare it, set it to here, and then we could
You can push it. You can push it.
you could push it to, but you could only push it to an array. So this one is just the variable we declare outside, and we give information inside, and now we could cancel log it outside because it's outside already. It's global scope cities. So that will give you same thing probably. Kansas City. Okay, it gave you the first thing, the first item. I don't know why I did that, but yeah, usually I don't mess with for each unless you really know what are you trying to do, because it mutates the data. It doesn't give you a new array. That's why I usually don't use it. Okay, any question about this? All right, we'll move on. Let's quickly. So we only have props. How you feel? How you guys feel about props, inheritance, and I mean prototypes. I mean not props. Prototypes, inheritance, and classes. You guys
Oh,
feel
I didn't even get a chance to look at it. I was working all day yesterday.
okay? All right. So let's quickly cover, and then we didn't even take a break. So I'll cover this and then we'll conclude it, inshallah. So let me know if you have any specific. We covered the this keyword. So remember, when we were doing the objects, we were using the this, and I gave an example of like my mouse. So if I say this mouse belongs to the run, so this is referring to the mouse itself. So so in JavaScript, this is refers to different things according to what we use. There's four ways to know. There is the global scope, which this refers to the window object. So if we open the console log here, and we say here console log this, that's all we need to do. Console log dot this. Okay. Now that refers to the window, which is the global scope element of the browser. So we don't usually use window because I mean it has no uses that much. So because you just basically referring to the global scope, a global window. There's the other one, implicit binding. This one is the one we used. Implicit, just like the word says, implicit. You're not explicitly saying, okay, this is what it's referring to. You're just saying, okay, this that greeting. You're basically saying, okay, this I mean the object. Okay, so that's what you're basically saying. So the rules for this one is basically it has to be declared inside a object, and if you want to know like how you know it is by every time you, let's say if you're using a method, every time you declare a method, that this keyword is referring to the item to the left of the dot, this dot. So this is what it's referring to. It's the object. So inside here, that's what it's referring to. That's implicit binding, is you imply basically where it's referring to. There's also explicit, there's a new binding. We'll get to the explicit binding. New binding is you create a new keyword right here. So we have this function, and it's also called constructor, which we will get to. This function, basically what it does, it takes a greeting, and greeting could be anything, and then it says, okay, so this is the only one that it takes in. So it gives all these items or methods, and consider this function as like an object. Okay, so these are basically properties for the object. We also have one function that is a method function. So this function basically prints this message. Now, if we want to if we want to run this function and basically create a new instance of or new object from it, if you want to create a new object from it, you say, okay, you say abdi is equal to new bind. So now this is referring to abdi basically, right? So you say new, and then you grab the name of the function, and then you say, okay, that and then you give the name of the person. Okay, so every time you have the new, what's referring to is the person that we said new. I'm going over really quickly. I mean, there's more detail to this, but a lot of times you will not see this unless we're doing like the prototypes, and also we're doing class. You see in class this new. So this one is important too. The fourth one, the last one, is explicit binding. This one you will see only in like when we're doing prototypes. Explicit binding is we're basically explicitly telling JavaScript where to connect or bind this keyword. So we're basically saying, okay, here is an example of where you should. Here's a function where you should connect this keyword to. Remember, we created a function that. Give me a second. 1 second. So we said that this keyword right here. Let's go to new binding. We did it. So explicit binding, you're telling it. You use three keywords. You use call. Actually, you use two: call or apply. Call basically allows you to connect a function with a object. Okay, I'm gonna give you a better example. Let's go back to our lesson from yesterday. That gives you a better example. Let's go code bin. I think there's a good example in there. So let's go all the way to the end. Let's go to lecture notes. So let's go down right here. So this is explicit binding. So explicit binding, what we're doing is we have a function here we created. We have a function here called student, right? This function, we wanna create a new object from this function. If we want to create a new object from this function, where we have two objects from here. So now we have a function, which is object actually itself. It's an object creator. We created two objects here, but they're not connected. How do we connect them? The way to connect them is by saying student, which is the function, dot call, and then giving in the object, student1. That's how you connect them, okay? And now if you run this, it will give you Fatima, right? So this is explicit binding. You will not use this a lot of times, so you don't have to think about it that much, but just to understand that if you want to connect an object to an object creator, this function, you use .call. There's also .bind. .apply, the difference between .apply and .call is that right here, .apply will invoke the function immediately. So this will invoke the function immediately. So both .call and .apply will call the function right away. But the apply, you have to pass an array as a method. So you have to pass an array. So right here should be an array for the .apply. Okay. I know I'm going over these complex subjects really quick because we don't have a lot of time and we're all, we've been here for a while. So now the bind is just a little bit different. So we have the same thing. We have the function and we have the object, the same function, the same object. But now if we want to connect these two, we have to do it this way. We have to store them in a new variable, right? So we do the same thing as the .call, but we here say bind. We do the same thing, but now we have to call this one. It will not work if we just console log this. So we have to call the new function that we stored in here. That's the only difference, right? Any questions so far? Okay, so these are the three principles to know. Read about them, understand what they are, what they do, watch videos about them. It helps to understand. Okay, now let's go to prototypes. Prototypes. Who remembers what prototypes are? Who can tell me a little bit about them? Give me like one sentence of prototypes, what they are. Who remembers it? I know we took it like yesterday. Was it yesterday? The day before? Or was it yesterday? I don't remember. So prototypes, okay? Prototypes are basically a right here, constructor functions, constructor. So prototypes, before we go into the prototypes, we have to do constructor functions. So constructor functions are like functions like this. So, and the way you know it's a constructor function is by the capital of the function name. This is not required, but this is a convention. So it's good to have that. So now we're creating a constructor or a object creator. You could call it object creator if you want. So object creator that is requiring all this information. It has attribute here because it's asking. It's not asking each one of these. So instead of saying here age, name, hometown, we just say attribute, and then we put the attribute right there. Right. So this is a object creator, and this is how it creates the object. So right here, we use the new keyword right here, just like we did the new binding. A new keyword, we say person. Don't forget this part. Make sure it's spelled exactly like the function. And then you create an object here, normal object. Make sure the object is the same style as this. It doesn't have to be same order, but it should have almost all of this stuff. So now we did all this. This is nice. I mean, you did already this, but what do we do with this? Okay. If you want to call it, you could call it. Actually, you could just say speak here. You could call it. And that method, you could call it. But if you try to do it for another person, let's say the second person, Shukri, and you want to call Shukri again, right? Now this is where the problem comes, and now this is where prototypes come. JavaScript, what it's going to do is it's going to create a new function here. When we call Hamdi, every time we call Shukri, it creates another one here. So in the memory of the JavaScript, it gets full quickly if you try to do this, and your browser or something will become slow. So that's why prototypes came. And where do prototypes came from? Prototype came from each object has a prototype automatically connected to it, and also each array, because arrays are also objects. So if you create here, let my object, let's say, equal to an empty object here, right? And we just do that, and I call my object. Okay. So now if we expand this, it has a proto connected to it automatically. And this has properties too by itself, a lot of properties. So one of the properties is a constructor, and it has a lot of them, a lot of stuff. So this is what we're trying to use to create a to move this function to prototype, right? So any question before we get to the prototype part? So we want to move this function outside of this constructor, right? So let's just let's copy it, actually, all of it, get rid of it, and come back here to add in prototypes. So we do the same thing, the same function, okay? Before we get to this class stuff, let's move this down. Before we get to class here, we're going to create a prototype here. So we say person dot prototype dot, we give the functions a name here. So the name was we actually deleted it. The name was speak, right? Equal to, and then we set it to the function, just like that. So this is very clunky. That's why we have classes. We get to classes, but this is what it does basically. So the same thing, it returns the same thing. Now, if you call Shukri dot speak, this function is gonna run. The prototype is gonna run, and it's very easy for the memory. So that was the main reason why we use prototypes. Okay. Any question about prototypes? That's it. That's it for prototypes. Actually, that's all they do. They create a new method for constructors. That's all they do. There's inheritance and all that stuff, which we can get to if you guys want. But for people who were in the class when we were covering this, you will understand that I think it was Thursday. Now, okay. So now let's get to class before we do all this. We're not going to do inheritance. So if you want to watch inheritance, you could go to the lecture. You see it. So class, okay. So classes are basically here. Where did we start with classes? Right here. So what are classes? Classes are not something new to JavaScript. I mean, they're not something that's special. Classes, you cannot hoist classes. You cannot hoist them. So the hoisting we talked about, you cannot call class at the top and then expect it to run. It's very strict. So the reason why it's strict is because it wants it to be nice and pretty. So classes are very strict. So it has a constructor. The constructor we were talking about, the function, it's inside the class. So right here, this is how the syntax class looks like. So we say parent, we just start with class parent, and then put the constructor function inside. We just call it constructor. That's the keyword to use it. And then the attributes is the same thing as the function, and then the same thing, the syntax that it was written in the constructor. Now we don't need prototypes. So we get to class, we don't need prototypes. So the methods that we're talking about, the functions, this is how we write them. We just say job, and then without even function, we just open it and then return it, right? That's pretty much it for classes. That's all you need to do. So now if we want to use the class, if you want to use it, you just call it like this. So you create a new instance of the class, new parent, object, just like that. If you want to call mom for the job object, the job method, this is how you call it. If you go down all the way, so we say mom job like that. We don't need any prototypes. We don't need any issues. So this is how you call it. And also there is inheritance, which we will not cover that much. So that's classes and prototypes. Any questions about it before we conclude? Let me see if I didn't cover something. So your job is now for the sprint project and also for the assignment, not the file assignment, for the sprint project, is to convert a prototype to a class. So taking a constructor function, a prototype method, and then converting that to a class-based. That's your main job. Okay. So you should know. So that prototype thing goes inside the function and it becomes just a simple method. And then the constructor function, you take the information inside it, and then you write constructor. You give the parameter, and then you just print it inside. Got it? Any questions before we conclude? Any clarification you guys need? Right. So read about it, watch more information. I shared a video of the Somali version I created a while back. About, did I do that? Did I constructors? Let me see. I think I did. Maybe I didn't. No, I didn't. It's okay. So I'm gonna share that too. So you can watch it. It might not, it's not exactly the way I'm explaining it right now, but it also helps. Classes, Somali JavaScript. Let's grab that. So classes and prototypes. Okay, I'll share it. Okay. All right, we'll conclude it here. If you guys don't have any question, tomorrow on Monday, make sure that you come this afternoon around 4. We will do I'll ask you guys to just ask me any questions. We can discuss. We could do maybe 30 minutes to an hour, so it's not going to be long. But I'm just going to check up on you guys and see how it's going. Make sure you finish all the assignments that you have. Use the time wisely, and make sure that you just keep understanding all the subjects. Write down notes and stuff like that. Flashcards of what prototypes is, what is the class, what is the closure, flashcards. You could find the definition online. Yeah, try your best, inshallah. Just like you studying for exam, study for the sprint project.
Okay, so the sprint project is it going to be next week?
Yeah, it's gonna be on Monday. So the sprint project, we're gonna do it on Monday because we can't do it on Sunday because Sunday is a break. So yeah, the spring project is Monday for 6 p.m. It's gonna start at 6 p.m. exactly, and it's gonna end at 10. Okay. So this is all the things that you'll be working on. Make sure not to work on it right now because it's timed. It's 4 hours. So make sure you only clone it or fork it at 6 p.m. on Monday. All right. Okay.
Thank you, Ustad. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you so much. This was actually really helpful. This was actually great. So yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
It's a good review. Very good review. Much needed.
Thank you. And I recorded it so you guys could go back anytime, inshallah. All right. Thank you, Khadija. Take care, guys. I'll see you this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yep. And also I didn't introduce to all of you. Maybe you were not here. Sydney, she's a high schooler. She goes to a school called Rosman in Minnesota. She came here to study with us and also just help us around whatever she can. So she's learning computer science in high school, which I wish I did when I was going to high school ages ago. So yeah, welcome her, and you guys. She's gonna be around, inshallah.
Great, welcome.
All right, guys. See you this afternoon. Keep working, guys. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.